We are just waiting, Dr. Sharma, for people to come in. The background music is going on.
Okay, so maybe we can begin and people can come trickling in, I guess. So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us, whoever has joined us today. I'm Srishti Bajpai, and I am a researcher and activist based in Pune at the moment, and I work with Kalpavriksha and part of the South Asia Bioregionalism Working Group. I would first like to give a bit of a background about this group, its emergence, and what we have been doing here. And then I will hand it over to today's moderator, Minkit Lepcha, and also introduce her. And then we will get into today's session and what it is about. So just to briefly let you know that Bioregionalism Working Group began during COVID period, but its emergence lies in a sangam, a confluence that we had organized on democracy in 2019 in Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan School for Democracy. And we discussed various things around how we can actually challenge the kind of problems we are facing in today's democracy, but also how do we need to begin reimagining our borders itself. And some participants at the Sangam raised this question that our current imagination of what governance is, what democracy is, it's still so anthropocentric. Whereas peoples and communities have imagined democracy, governance from a more than human perspective and from respecting natural boundaries and respecting nature's boundary. And so we need to begin thinking from those lines as well, because a lot of current nation-state boundaries actually cut across contiguous natural boundaries. And so this group was formed with an exploration, with an intention of an exploration of what does it really mean to talk about bioregionalism, not from a Western context, but really from a decolonial perspective, from communities' perspective, from practice perspective. And some people who are interested in this theme got excited about it and came together and have been discussing and unpacking this term from peoples and practices and also their own experiences. And we have also had conversations across the world with people who have been actually trying to come up with practices of bioregionalism, living in bioregions. And what this group is trying to do is, one, to unpack this term, second, to create possibilities of having conversations and dialogues around this, create possibilities of research, which is the objective of today's webinar, which is trying to showcase the results of one of the research projects and what came out of it. And we will get to know more about it from the team. And the other is, of course, to create these spaces of envisioning. Wherever this doesn't exist, how do we create spaces for imagining governance and boundaries, thinking about nature and through nature and understanding through nature. And so the idea is also to do envisioning and advocacy through this group. And we are very happy to launch our second report today. A few months ago, we had launched our first report that was mapping bioregions across India. And it's amazing the kind of initial mapping that has happened through this. And you can look at the website link we'll put in the chat and know more about it. And today we are launching our second report, which Uttam and his colleagues will today talk about. But before we get into that, and you can see the report link is shared on the chat, and you can go and take a look at it. But before we start that, I would like to welcome our moderator for the day, Minkit Lepcha. She's an amazing person that I've had a good fortune to know about. And of course, a more formal introduction is that she has been engaged in documenting and telling stories, folklore based in Darjeeling, Sikkim over the last 10 years. She got an opportunity to direct a film on River Teesta through Sopecom. It's an organization based in Pune, and trace the river from the source till the river leaves the mountain. Having always been inspired by Lepcha folklore and believing that the ecological wisdom are hidden in these stories, she has been creating workshops based on the folklore of Himalayan communities. And she has been traveling, narrating stories of rivers, seeds, birds, mythical creatures to school and college students across India and Nepal. She's an awardee of Young Green Filmmaker 2016 in Woodpecker International Film Festival for her film Voice of Teesta. And her film also earned 10th position amongst 110 films in World Water Forum in Brazil in 2018. So it's a great honor that she is here with us, and she will be coordinating and moderating today's session. Over to you, Minkit.
Thank you so much, Srishti, and I'm really honored to be actually moderating on River Teesta. It feels really, surreal, because all this while I've been telling the story, but now I have these amazing scientists and professors who are going to talk about this, workshop, the whole multi-hazard mapping of River Teesta. And I think it's really an honor where we kind of take the conversation not just from the stories perspective, but from the science perspective also. And I think just to kind of give a little bit of a snapshot of, this mapping, because River Teesta has always been associated with either activism or some kind of the dams, but I don't see there is a larger conversation about hazards that has been happening, be it the flood or be it the earthquake, and everything is interdependent and interrelated. And often we do not really see that River Teesta is a transboundary river which does not just flow in India but goes to Bangladesh and finally to Bay of Bengal, and how these different countries are a part of it and equally affected by the disasters. So I think today's session is going to be amazing, because we have Dr. Uttam Lal and of course our Dr. Rajesh Kumar, who is going to talk about different perspective of multi-hazard mapping of River Teesta, because I don't think many people, we have heard enough of these hazards being mapped. And I think that's a very nice way, cohesive way of looking at River Teesta and how we are not just culturally, but disasters also connect us. So I think without taking much time, I would love to introduce Dr. Uttam Lal. He is a faculty in the Department of Geography, Sikkim University, having acquired his doctorate from JNU, New Delhi, while working on environmental constraints in the Western Himalaya. Dr. Lal joined Sikkim University as a founding member of Department of Geography. He headed the department from 2015 to 18 and during 2022 also. Dr. Lal was also the nodal person from Sikkim University in the Inter-University Consortium on Chrysosphere and Climate Change, IUCCCC. This consortium studied the Himalayan Chrysosphere, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, cryosphere, and its effect on society, their adaptive measures. And Dr. Lal led the team of Sikkim University. His area of academic interest covers the Himalayan ecology, highland social economic dynamics, rangeland studies, and cross-border interactions. So I think we really look forward to his presentation. But before we do that, I would also quickly introduce our another speaker, Dr. Rajesh Kumar. He's currently working as an assistant professor in the Department of Geography, Sikkim University, which is in Gangtok. And he successfully defended his PhD on geography, which was based on fluvial processes in Lower Rapti River Basin, and a case study of impacts on arable land from the CSRD JNU in 2011. He was awarded Junior Research Fellowship in 2009 by the University Grant Commission, New Delhi. He worked as research associate in the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India, sponsored a project on Ganga River Basin Management Plan in collaboration with School of Environmental Sciences, JNU and IIT Kanpur during October 2011 to July 2013. Further, he joined the CSRD as research associate and worked in the Department of Sciences, DST, GOI-sponsored project on geomorphological and chronostratigraphic reconstruction of glacial episodes of Gangotri Glacial in Bhagirathi Basin. Apologies, these words are very, very bombastic for me, but anyways, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. N.W. Garwal, Himalaya, from August 2013 to August 2014. He is actively involved in research and has about 32 publications, and published by the national and international publishers. His major research areas are related to applications of geospatial technology in river science. His research papers are related to the Anthropocene epoch of geological time scale, dealing with impact of human activities on river and climate-related disaster. I think it's an amazing, the kind of study both of the speakers have done, and it is honor for us to really hear from them because we don't get this kind of opportunity. And let me also remind you that we also have a very young student, Tulsi Sharma, who will be joining us in the Q&A towards the other half of our discussion. He is a MSc in Geography, and he's done PG Diploma in GIS and Remote Sensing Application from the Center for Remote Sensing Application, University of North Bengal. He joined the Department of Geography, Sikkim University in 2011, and he has more than 12 years of experience in management of GIS and remote sensing lab, and is trained in the latest techniques in geographical analysis. That is statistical analysis, computer-aided cartography, primary data collection, and geographical field surveys. So what an honor to have even Tulsi, a young dynamic student, to be a part of this discussion. Now, I will not give too much of introduction because there was a lot of very complicated words in between, which I failed to pronounce it, I guess. But I really invite Dr. Uttam Lal to please begin your presentation, and we are really excited to see this whole disaster that we talk about, and your report has been really, really elucidative, and it's very, for me, it was an honor to read it, and look forward to your presentation. Over to you, Dr. Lal.
So here is the report. I just wanted to also show the report, and so Uttam da, over to you now.
Well, thank you, Srishti. Thank you, Minkit. To begin with, how did we, reach here, or how we conceptualize this thing? Of course, I mean, our friend Mirza asked me to, put together a report on Teesta, if we can, do something. And then three of us, we sat together and we thought, what should we do and why should we do? So I thought rather than, we speaking the same thing over and again, so I thought how this report is going to be useful to others. So I'll speak on that part and disaster part, and a little bit on how this report was put together, would be taken care by my colleague Rajesh. And Tulsi, he is our colleague. He is no longer a student, though he looks very young. So Tulsi would join us as and when there is questions related to this. Well, how we see any of the Himalayan river is what we look at the rivers. We know that the Himalayan river passes through a lot of ecological zone because there's a lot of altitudinal variations. So we interact with the rivers according to our sensibility, and at times what we see that if there is dramatic changes across the flow regime of the Himalayan river, sometimes some of the very dramatic changes in altitude, it remains out of our perception related to how we personalize a river, how we understand a river. So that's where we thought that we'll initiate this report on Teesta, so that further studies can be taken over on this, and so that this Teesta as a representative of the Himalayan river can be taken up in a holistic manner. If we see Teesta, so to say, about 9% of Teesta drainage area, it lies in altitude which is above nearly about 5,200 meters. Now, for some of us, it might be an alien, altitudinal figure. But if we look from the perspective of how human body reacts to the altitude, so on an average altitude of about 5,500 meters, the amount of oxygen which is needed by a normal human body, it is exactly half at that altitude. So what I'm trying to say here is that about 9% of the drainage area of Teesta lies above 5,200 and above meters. Similarly, if we look into the alpine zone or the alpine meadows, where traditionally the nomads or the people who have been grazing yaks and the other animals in the high altitudinal area, that zone, it constitutes about 22% of the entire Teesta Basin, which is a fairly higher proportion of geographical area. Now, these two areas put together about area of the rise in this altitudinal area. 30% lies there, but the population-wise, there's barely any population lies in this altitudinal zone. Now, the imagination of Teesta or the story of Teesta is always or the often told across where the society looks more visible. But what happens at the extremely high altitudinal area where the growing season is minimal to negligible, and the ecological equilibrium is quite precariously placed there. Similarly, if you see at the lower altitudinal area, and I'm talking about near the India-Bangladesh border, there would be about say 21% of this geographical area would be in the altitude which is below 100 meters. Now, if we see these two areas, the high altitude and the low altitudinal area, we often see that the Teesta's story is not told about from this altitudinal zone. So 30%, about 20% of the drainage area of Teesta. This means nearly around 50%. And the Teesta's story is not talked about from the 50% of its geographical area, the drainage area. So what is being represented time and again often is only about the 50% of the drainage area of the Teesta Basin area. This means what? This means there has been a disconnect in the story of Teesta, which is talked about. And we talk about high altitudinal area or the low altitudinal area. The altitudes, the different altitudes along the river is interconnected. So what unfolds in the higher altitudinal area, it has a bearing on the lower altitudinal area. And the same river Teesta, if you look at in the alpine zone, and if you look at near the plains below 100 meters, people from the hills would not be able to recognize those who have not been actually themselves there. The same Teesta, and there are different children of the same river. How is that possible? Now, that is possible because the river is a suturing entity, but we do not perceive the river as a suturing entity. It passes through different ecological zone, and different ecological zone means it passes through different society and their different belief system and how they interact with the rivers on day-to-day basis. That differs. And that is how the stories along Teesta is, some of the stories are more frequently told, and some of the stories are relegated. And not often that this story has to be in line with how often people suffer and how many people suffer. Because if how many people suffer along a particular Himalayan river, then it has to be according to the population density, but which is not always the case. And this is where we thought that this report, when if one sees from the perspective of bioregions, this is going to be the report on the basis of which further studies on Teesta can be approached and looked after. Because if we even in Sikkim, if we talk about the Teesta area, a lot of people get surprised that those who have been operating in the extremely high altitudinal area around 5,000 meters and above, the Dokpas, traditionally they have not known of hunting in their area. But in the more recent times, the hunters have all also been there. Now all kind of people have been there. Then the Teesta, the upper altitudinal area of Teesta has become the zone of extreme security concern. So there's all kind of players have come along Teesta, and then of course down south near India-Bangladesh border. Then another dimension of security has been there. So you see at the top and at the bottom, the security concern on the both end of the river suddenly appears to take the prime concern. So from the perspective of nation state, security appears to be prime concern. Then there is energy security. So in between the mid altitudinal area, the security the energy security concern appears to be the prime concern of those who interact with Teesta, whether it is from the community perspective or from the perspective of those who govern the area, or from the perspective of the government. So this is where we thought that this report is going to be the base report for studying the bioregions in Teesta River Basin, and we thought that in a given time frame, it is not a very long-term study, so to say, even though we have data relatively longer period of time, but it's a short study. So we thought that we would be talking about the multiple hazards along the different ecological zones in Teesta. This is where I would stop, and then I'll request Rajesh to talk about the hazards and how we approach this study on the data.
So, good evening, everyone, and thank you, sir, for setting the platform to speak up further. And this short report was basically based on open access data. Everyone can download that data and they can apply some statistical technique to make the data scale-free or unit-free. Then simple addition will give us multiple hazard map. So that's what we have done in this report. So further, I'm going to tell you so it is already given in table number 4 of the report. So the plain region basically covering an altitude from 20 to 100 meter above mean sea level. So this area is plain area and basically occupied by agriculture, and this region, this plain region, is frequently affected by flooding. The next zone is Piedmont Plain. So Piedmont Plain is again occupied by agricultural activities, plantation, and this region is also influenced by flooding. Next region is lower hills. Its elevation is varying from 250 meter to 1500 meter, and this zone is covered by forest, terrace farming, then forest fire, flash flooding, landslide, and earthquakes. Number of earthquakes in this region is very high. And since this region is very fragile in nature, and due to high rainfall, landslide activities are increasing. Next zone is mid-hills. So its altitude varies from 1500 to 2000 meters above mean sea level. So these hills are occupied by forest, terrace farming, forest fire, and landslide. But when we are going up in mid-hills, the intensity of occurrence of landslide and forest fire is increasing. Next zone is higher hills. And these hills are covering altitude zone of 2000 to 3,500 meters. And again, this region is occupied by forest, terrace forming, forest fire, and landslides. Next zone is alpine meadows. So its altitude varying from 3,500 meter to 5,200 meter above mean sea level. And this region is covered by alpine meadows, scrubland, glacial lakes, and here we have high probability of glacial lake outburst flooding. And above this zone, we have frozen land, permanently frozen land. And this region is basically influenced by snow avalanches. Now, I will tell that I can say that due to increase in temperature, forest fire cases are increasing in this role. Increasing forest fire cases, landslide activities are also increasing. So, in fact, climate change is a bigger is a big culprit nowadays, which is enhancing mass movement processes as well as natural process. Even if we see the density of roads, it is very high in the mid hills as compared to all other altitudinal zones, especially in mountainous terrain. And this construction of road or extension of the road or expansion of the road is also responsible for landslide activities. So at last, I can say that GIS is a good platform for data integration and preparing good maps. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. I think I feel like you have done a lot of. I don't know if Dr. Lal wants to add to it, or because I want to kind of point on few things which was there in the report.
Well,
Do you want to add?
Yeah, so there were other things that we were trying to do, but since it was short study, so we limited ourselves with the studying the multi-hazard in the river basin, and what we try to do with the report is we try to categorize or we try to demarcate that, as Rajesh was pointing out, that which altitudinal area is more vulnerable to what kind of hazard has been. And why this has been important is, sometimes we have, completely, sometimes we have kind of completely ignored some of the historical events or some of the historical hazards from one ecological zone to another ecological zone. Like in Teesta Basin in the 1960s, the district in West Bengal, in say Kuch Bihar, in Jalpaiguri, so to say, they suffered great deal. Not only that, even in Bangladesh, they suffered great deal. And why did it happen? Because there was nearly kind of flash flood situation which unfolded in Teesta, and this was because there was extremely heavy elderlies. They do have some bit of memories of this great extremely heavy rainfall in the Sevok area in the hills, but it has a very, very devastating effect down there along the India-Bangladesh border and in the south. Had happened in the 1960s with the episodes of this precipitation. And after couple of years, again there was a flood in Teesta. The people of the Teesta Basin, the lower altitudinal area, they are still struggling to come to terms with it, because then there was embankment which was constructed in Jalpaiguri and Kuch Bihar, and certain flow of Teesta was diverted from one area to another area in order to safeguard certain market. Like if you see the report, there's a subdivision called Machliganj in Kuch Bihar. In order to safeguard, embankment was made, and then certain areas of the flow of the river Teesta was diverted. This means it had a more devastating effect downstream in Bangladesh, because it's a principle of simple jetty effect. If you have a water pipe and if you put finger in front of the water pipe, the water flows with force. And that extremely heavy rainfall which happened in the 60s in the hills, and the people along the Teesta is still negotiating the effect of that heavy rainfall. And then of course the dams came in between, and then embankment, all those things. So this is what we have been trying to achieve with this report, that whatever happens in one ecological zone, it has a bearing on the other ecological zone, even though people may sometime may not be connected across the ecological zone, but at the end of the day, it's the same river, right? So whatever is happening there in the higher zone, it will have a repercussion on the lower zone. If I may put it this way, to some it might be really impolite, but when I talk to my students who are from Sikkim Darjeeling area, when I ask them that you are the children of the Teesta, do you even consider the similar fashion that those who are in the border areas of India, Bangladesh, consider themselves equally as a citizen of Teesta? So they say that we don't even know Teesta, what is there in that aspect. So that is the level of disconnect. It's the same river, and our general agreement when we started this report, of course with the initiation from Mirza, that we should do this report. Our common understanding about the Himalayan river was that the Himalayan rivers are a suturing thread. It's sutures that even though it is indirectly, people are connected. And what happens, like Rajesh was talking about, the flash flood or glacial lake outburst flood. Now, back in the days, because how things are connected, I'm just giving you an example. Back in the days when people used to graze the altitudinal area around the alpine zone, around 3,000 meters and a little higher up, where the graziers were active on a more frequent note, people used to know that what is unfolding in that ecological zone, and they would how the meltwater is behaving that particular season. They would expect what is coming. And with their expectation, the villages along the lower altitudinal zones, they would also be gearing up for that. But with all the information that we have in the modern day and time, we are understanding our rivers little less, because we are trying to understand the river in more sectoral fashion. So this is where we thought that we would be pitching our report for people to work on Teesta on a more concerted manner when it comes to the different ecological setup. And we thought maybe this would be the way forward for the other Himalayan river also, if one take into account.
One more point that I would like to add here. If we see the area which is just near to the flowing Teesta, and if we see the settlement density before 1980 and after 1980, you can find out more than 500% increase on that vulnerable area. And if any hazard is taking place in the higher altitude zone, say it is low, it is going to affect or it is going to damage those buildings or human activity, whether they are using low lying area near to the along the river, or I can say terraces. Lower terraces are occupied by human beings nowadays. And if any flooding is happening like 1968, then it will going to create disaster or devastation in hilly region as well as in plain region. So climate change is happening, human population is increasing. So disaster is going to increase in this tendency.
Right. I think it's a very interesting way of, I think it was about time where we talk about the disaster and how we need to map the disaster. But it goes to both of you speakers, especially when we talk about disasters. Oh, in the report, what I could see was, there was this earthquake, there was a flood, and then there was the glacial lake melting and stuff like that. But then I think it's also, when we look at disaster at this current time and current moment, it's very important to look at the disaster from the natural process and human induced disaster. Because I think somewhere in the report, I felt like the human induced disasters was not really explained. When we look at even the border area, have to really look into, in terms of disaster, how, if you really look at it, and most of the policies of water is based on the old treaties that we are looking at. So I felt like maybe this is a few things that I don't know if you could throw some light on it, because human induced disasters are something, because one thing is flood is very easy to talk about, and forest fires and earthquakes, but the human induced, because I think there was a mention of a lot of building of roads around these mountains, which is creating earthquakes. If I'm correct, there was a mention of building of roads, right?
Not, ma'am, actually this report is basically, main objective was to map natural disaster. We didn't
Okay.
focus on anthropogenic disaster or hazard. So, in a way, in what we were talking about, it is just to bring focus on interaction between human beings or human environment and future disaster if it is occurring. As the lower areas along the river are occupied by human activity.
Minki, your point is well taken. Whenever one talks about the river and the disaster, of course, I mean any kind of disaster, there's a human dimension to it. But then, in terms of the study period, because this is the report which we put together in 3 months. Right? So somewhere you have to draw the line, and when it comes to the anthropogenic aspect of it, certain bit is doable in relatively shorter time. Like if we only take the built up area along the say Teesta Basin. So this dimension of anthropogenic activity one can take into account.
Yeah, but I think, can you hear me?
Then I keep telling my students that, am I audible?
Yes, I think I'm breaking, but yeah, I can hear you.
So, like I keep telling my student that wherever you live, do you even know that from where your water comes and from people, they are not concerned about from where their water comes. right? So that is a disconnect with the water, and that itself is a marker of, when disconnect in a way is I say disconnect in very many ways. It's being rude, and being rude to what? Being rude to the nature. So nature somehow has a, it knows the way of maintaining equilibrium, and disaster, we call it disaster, but if we look into the, nature's aspect of balancing energy through flood or earthquake, it's about maintaining the equilibrium. So
Absolutely.
so, so I get what you are trying to say. So if we as society, we live in an ecologically vulnerable space and we remain disconnected with our ecological setting, so those what I feel that, that the anthropogenic activities and those dimensions of design, and probably it would figure in if there's a, a bigger report if we attempt. So possibly,
Yeah.
not
Yeah, absolutely.
else can build over it.
Yeah, but it's just addressing a part of it would be a really nice beginning, because even for that matter, the way we see earthquake, the way we see landslide, the way we see forest fires, I think somewhere it has been mentioned that all of these are a domino effect, right? If there is an earthquake, there will be a landslide. If there is a landslide, there will be a flood in the downstream. And
Cascading effect.
In geography, we it's by and large it's the same thing what you are saying, domino.
yeah, as a layman, I'm not a student of geography, but I think so as a layman, and when we look at disaster, somewhere we are also looking at how these terminologies kind of get into the local understanding of how we are interconnected, right? Because geography is about like connection, and I think that is something which I found really interesting in your conclusion part, where you also talked about oral history being a very important part. And like Dr. Lal, you rightly mentioned how the river's color used to be a sign of what's happening in the upstream, and how the downstream would already know. So I think I would love to know about what are because some of the way forwards that has been mentioned was very interesting for me, especially the oral history project of rivers can be taken up with being conscious of the altitudinal diversity of the basin. So the way the Lachenpas and the Lachenpas would look at the river, and the way the downstream, especially in the West Bengal and the Sikkim confluence, they see the river, because the whole Bangladesh area, the way they see the rivers are very different, and how the disasters speak, but it's the same language, the language of water is speaking, right, in many ways. So if you kind of really also bring forward what are the ways that these disasters can be localized, or probably how can we look at these disasters as more of a common phenomena which affects all of us, and it is not something that's happening just in Sikkim or somewhere just in Bangladesh. How can we go about looking at these disasters as a common denominator for all of us to be connected?
Well, it's a easier said thing than done, because at times
I know, but let's dream.
Because at times what we have noticed in not only in case of Teesta but the other Himalayan rivers as well, that at times we remain disconnected with the altitudinal zones above us and the lower, and at times we get over emotional about certain dimensions of the river, right? So when we talk about the dams and how the dams is destroying the local ecology, even though I would say in case of this this dam and the anti-dam brigade is the wide basing of anti-dam thing in Sikkim is a very recent phenomenon, because earlier I would say that the anti-dam movement was mostly about the lectures, right? And then when it became politically comfortable, then only rest of the community also started talking about the dams, that how the dams are, certain dimensions of the dams are problematic. right? And at the same time, it's about the community who shares the altitude, right? So you see the layer, the digression in how we connect with the rivers and its setting. Now, having said that, we are not equally emotional as how we are emotional about the dams, about say the industries which have come along with this.
True.
Because dams are going to influence us in both in a negative and a positive manner in that altitude only. But the pharmaceuticals and the other industry which have come along this, it is not destroying or it is not affecting us directly. So the people down the stream will deal with it. So that does not get talked about, right?
And also the fish, the marine life.
So fish is altogether it's a different story. I was coming to it. Like if you take into account there's a very celebrated variety of fish in Teesta called boreali, and Bengal people of Bengal, they know about this because this happens to be the one of the favorite fish of their chief minister, right? But the people in Sikkim and Darjeeling do not know about boreali fish. It's the same river. So even though that fish is in West Bengal, it's there. They should have ownership, at least emotional connect with that variety of fish, but nobody is bothered about it. And this is what I mean, that it is easier said than done. Until people associate themselves with the entire course of the river rather than their ecological zone, this disconnect. Otherwise, we will keep on saying that the government should do this, government should do that. Earlier, rivers used to be not only the zone of suturing, but it used to be the highway also. In certain time of the year, people used to move along the river. In the winters, that used to be the highway for the people. In the higher altitudinal area, people would not take any other route; they would walk along the river. This time around, when we are into different aging time, very few places people even think river that way. Even in Sikkim, certain section of river Teesta was navigable.
True.
Talk about it that the Teesta used to be navigable. The entire talk about the Manji, even though the Manji
the Maji community. Yeah, many people don't talk about Maji community.
Manjis are basically they are the Sato community now. They are the ghost community for Sikkimese for all.
So many communities, not just Sikkim, but yeah. Because I think when I was filming, there was one Maji community I found in Kalampong. It was in Sepkola.
And that community was primarily along the Teesta in the mountain area, basically to help people ford across the Teesta. That was their prime job. So Teesta has changed nature because the way people have started interacting with Teesta, right? So because now the bridges have come, now bridges have their own stories to be talked about. But all these are the sub-stories that how bridges are stable, how bridges are built. But these are all the stories of Teesta, right? And then these are a very sectoral story. So this is where that we thought that we would build a base with this report.
Yes.
Hopefully somebody would take it further as the entire story of Teesta. Teesta being the sectoral, the way we see Teesta. There is a seen part and there's unseen part. So that was our prime objective when we were thinking about this report in 3 months, that what we can even do.
Right. I think there are a few questions coming in the chat box. I will address to that. But just a quick, I was really curious to know, because I think, Dr. Lal, you've been talking about the detachment that the communities have been having with the river Teesta, and it's just not with the river Teesta, it's with many rivers actually across Southeast Asia. But where do you think, or even to Dr. Sharma, where do you think this detachment is coming from? What made us detach from these rivers? I mean, while we talk about almost more than 42 dams and more than 50 pharmaceutical companies in River Teesta, So as I speak, and the detachment is so, you can see it's so pregnant, it's there, in spite of all this, people are not speaking up. and people are not really talking about the river Teesta and what it's suffering. So where do you think, even while you were mapping these hazards, where do you think these detachments were coming from, in spite of the fact they are equally a part of these disasters?
Well, I would not blame people entirely, or rather, by and large, I would not blame people if they are not speaking about any of the river, be it Teesta or any.
I mean, not the blaming, it's just the detachment. Where is it coming from?
Let me answer that. I would not blame it because I would be talking about particular thing only if I know that particular thing in all its dimension.
Right.
So, how I would put it is the way we educate, and when I say educate, does not only mean the formal education. When the way we live and the way we make our younger generation aware. Earlier, people used to go to this stuff for various reasons, maybe for bathing, maybe for merrymaking, maybe for religious purposes. Now those things have changed because, of course, time changes, the way we interact, the way we consume things, that also changes. But what we are not able to do is, as individual also living along the Teesta, we are not interacting with the Teesta the way we should have been interacting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that is where I keep telling all the time that to my student that if you are somewhere, you at least get to know from where your water is coming and where the dirty water is going. You would be surprised that 90% of people here, they are not aware from what's their water source.
True.
So I would say that at the base of it is the disconnect with the river. Even though we emotionally say that we live by Teesta or by Ganges or whichever river, we only know a very little part of that river.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, you would have the connect with the river if you know something, right? I have my connect with my mother because I know my mother well. If I don't know my mother well, I will not have that emotional connect. So same goes with the river.
Mm.
So I know it in a very sectoral manner. So our connect is also in that manner only, very sectoral. So I would be more emotionally connected. Somebody is doing something in my area and my river is getting this or that. But I give you an example of how we respond to the dams vis-a-vis the pharmaceuticals.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yes, sir. Yes, Dr. Sharma.
Just see if someone is constructing dam across the river, then how dam is influencing free flow of water as well as nutritious sediments. So it is just breaking the connection between upslope area and downslope area of the dam. So if we see the data, the density of dam in Teesta Basin is highest in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it is going to affect biodiversity and riparian vegetation along the channel in downstream area, even in mid hills and mid monsoon. So
That's true.
Just creating disconnection.
This is very because there's one bigger disasters. We should keep talking about the dams and the pharmaceutical companies, but there are recent anglers, the anglers who have been doing a lot of fishing, but not really fishing, but catch and release. So they catch golden mahseer and they release it to the river. And with that, not only do they engage with the river, but they actually also kind of create awareness about how angling can be equally safe for the river as well as for the fish. But somehow recently, especially in West Bengal, the anglers has been told not to fish anymore because apparently it is not good for the river, and there is a big chunk of tourism happening around the riverside. So these are very interesting conversations to talk about, and how we talk about big disasters, dams, but there are little disasters which is creating a lot of detachment from the river for a local riverine people also, or like just anglers for that matter. But anyways, I will open this question because there's somebody who has written. She or he writes, "Thank you very much for sharing your valuable thoughts. It was wonderful knowing more about Teesta River Basin. My question is, how can bioregionalism as a concept can help us draw connection between anthropogenic activities, Teesta River, and climate change effects? And can bioregionalism help in striking an ecological balance between humans and basins like Teesta?" So this is a question that has been addressed. Anybody can answer this.
Who is going? Shall I go? Okay. Well, thank you very much. This is where we have been, some of the post presentation comments that we were, pitching in. And this is what we would also, like how rivers should be visualized at. Of course, there's different ecological zone, but if we see Teesta as a, having its bioregions, or rather, the highway which connects the different ecological zone, then one would also be able to take into account that what are the activities is absolutely known, or how much that one should be doing in which ecological zone. Unless until we do that, because let me go to the dams. Because we have often seen, even in the case of dams, that the ELA is prepared for the dams, and it would be prepared for if there are a series of dams along the river, it would be prepared few kilometers above that dam and few kilometers below the dam, as if the dams are not going to affect further down, right? So even our environmental assessment of a particular project is also sectoral. So the only thing that is going to make sense in terms of the activities, disaster, is only if we start looking at the particular river as zone, or as an artery, or as a highway, which relates one ecological zone to another. Because if we continue to have the reports in sectoral manner, as I have been saying, things is it, and at best it would be half-hearted effort. I'm not hoping for that people who are working for the rivers, they have to reinvent the wheel themselves. Even if we take into account the traditional knowledge that the society had, even if you take into the folklore, for that matter, Minkit, that the Lepcha folklore, which talks about a hunter which came down from the Terai foothills, tracing the hair. Back in the days, it's and goes to Zongu. So back in the days, it's not only about from upstream to downstream, but even the legends are there that along the river people have been going upstream. Now here is the situation where you have multiple dams. There would be no such stories. There would be only legends of the past, and which would get lost with the passing generations.
True, that's true. It's a different thing now. The folklore has become myth because the river colors have changed, the shapes have changed. The folklore just remains just that was what it was. But I think you're right in terms of how we also need to. I think the bioregionalism is a very important concept which was always there, but it's just that I think over a period of time also we've forgotten in a way, because the folklore does talk about it, right? And anyways, I think we have Mr. Ashish Kothari. He has put up a very interesting question. Would really request if we can just unmute himself and probably ask the question directly. Ashish, are you there?
Okay, thanks, Minkit. Can you hear me? Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks to all the.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you. That was a fascinating report. My question was whether a report like this could actually, how maybe this report could be used or useful to communities and NGOs that are challenging the kind of destructive development projects, industrial and development projects on the or along the Teesta. And what more needs to be done along the same lines for this kind of useful information and analysis for such movements. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ashish, for it's a very interesting question. Well, I would say that for the court cases, this report needs to be further expanded, because court would be not looking into a report from perspective of scholarship, or court would not be very creatively looking at the report. Court would require more hard data, that how much is the sedimentation, how much is the area is going to be affected because there's a dam and the sediment flow pattern has been interfere with. But this can definitely be the initial marker to talk about those things, because such kind of reports, when we break the drainage area of a particular river into percentages, and with those percentages and the altitude, we can relate it with the population density. So then we can definitely relate it with the population pressure and the vulnerability of the various disaster in that particular ecological zone. But for the court cases, this report needs to be a little more expanded, so that court does not have additional questions related to this, or court does not feel that there are certain gray area which needs to be studied further. Those are the a little bit more information. If there's more time for a report, any Himalayan river, if it is there, those kind of data is available. The only thing is, or can be generated. The only thing is, it requires a little more time to gather those data and do the little more engaged analysis with the ground truthing.
All right. I was just very, because when we talk about data, there is also the transparency of data, right? Because I don't know if there is the kind of data that goes in the ground really kinds of comes in the community, or for that matter, even the news media. So I think that's a good way of looking at it. But I feel also, just adding on to what Ashish sir talked about, is our community has to be really looked into how to create the data themselves, because they already have a data, and kind of safeguard those data so that these report kind of comes to the research team in a very transparent way. Because I think that's one area which we have not really looked at it, and not just from the academia perspective, but from the community perspective as well. But anyway, I will look into, I think we have our Ma'am Usha Lachunpa. She writes, disconnect with downstream dynamics of river is possible because people haven't felt the need to know. And interest in upstream dynamics is natural, as people need to constantly know the status of their water supply. The tourist scenario, example, Lachen village is high above the Teesta and get their water from local streams which are cared for, not from Teesta. So only higher up where their yaks graze do they really get to touch their river. Similarly, even downstream dams don't really touch them. So how or why to create the emotional connect downstream? That's what the question is. How or why to create the emotional connect downstream?
Well, I'm a little, constrained for getting the right word for this, but as I gave you example of the flood which was there in Teesta in the 1965. This was just one example that I gave you. Right, what unfolds in the upper stream, there is a connect what is happening in the downstream. If you look into the entire landscape of Teesta area in Kuch Bihar section of Teesta, it has changed a great deal, and it has changed a great deal because of the flow pattern and what has unfolded in the mountain areas because of the dams and the other things. So it's not only it's something like the transboundary river, the classic case that we think that if we are high, rather upper riparian state, we think that we have all the rights or most of the rights to the river. So I find it's little insensitive to the people who live downstream to think that why there should be emotional connect with the downstream. If you look at the situation of the people who live along the Teesta in the plain area around 100 meters altitude or around 200 meters altitude, they have been forced to vacate certain area, and some of them have started living inside the embankment because what unfolded in the last few years because of the flow change in the flow pattern and the change in the rate of sedimentation in Teesta. So there is every connection in the downstream also, but we don't get affected by the flood if we are sitting in the mountains on monthly basis. Once in a while, if there's a flash flood, we'll get connected, and then only we'll or the potential flash flood we'll be thinking about. But in the downstream, in the same river, there are people, little bit of change in the upstream, their entire livelihood and everything goes away. So even in the Teesta Basin, if you take community in the Teesta Basins, they have been forced to change their settlement, not once, not twice, but 10 times in course of last 20 years. And it's the same Teesta, which would be a little different at how we understand Teesta in the mountain areas. So something may not be directly affecting us in the mountains, or vice versa if we see that way. So as long as we are not sensitive to what the river and how the river is behaving, or how people are interacting with the river or connecting with the river upstream and downstream, that disconnect is going to be there. And even if we need certain policy correction from the river, if I am only talking about my area, how much voice it's going to generate. But if entire river valley talks about that particular river, imagine the amount of voice and the visibility that is going to generate. This is exactly happened when the anti dam movement or the affected citizen of Teesta thing happened. It remained for a long time. It remained as if it is the movement of only the lectures. Now it is politically comfortable for everyone to own up that movement, but we know the fact that how that anti-dam movements remain. Most people remain outside this thing.
Yes, you're right. I guess it's just a matter of time. But yeah, I think Usha ma'am really meant we're just not sensitive enough, the upstream people with the downstream, and maybe sometimes it's also the political and the power play of the countries. But anyway, so I would want if there anyone who wants to ask questions or probably can unmute themselves and have some few words or any. We have Shrishti. Yes, Shrishti.
Well, first of all, congratulations to the team. I think it is a fantastic report with a lot of scientific backing to things that social movements have been speaking about for a long time. But now it has at least an initial scientific backing to it of how all of these things are so connected. I'm just trying to build on what Usha ji raised and what you both have been also saying, Uttam ji and Rajesh ji. One is this, that I want to know, is there a temporal issue? I mean, I want to understand the temporality of this, that this disconnection from the rest of the bioregions, this is a disconnection of the upstream from the downstream. Is it a recent phenomena, or do you see, maybe not in this report, but maybe all of you have been working in this basin for quite some time, do you see that this disconnection is a more recent phenomena, and there were in the past ways that people connected to the different ecological regions. And the second, which is also again connected to this earlier question, is that one that Minkit was asking why this disconnection is there. And I would like to ask you both, or ask you three, that how can this disconnection be mitigated? Like, what can people do to challenge this disconnection? What we need to do? And it's not just related to Teesta, it's related to all our ecosystems as well. People are disconnected to that ecosystems. And what do you, through your experience, feel can be done to really renew, revive, regenerate this disconnection? Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks again for this wonderful work.
Well, thank you, Srishti. I'm glad you asked this question. Well, first of all, I would say that this disconnect is not intentional, but this disconnect have unfolded basically because of how our, the modern ways of development have unfolded, right? So the boundaries and borders have of all kind have come up, and those boundaries and borders have become rather the punctuating boundary rather than regulating boundary. So the connection of the people across different ecological zones that have gone, rather it has been rather filtered out. Now let me give you one example from Teesta Basin only. Along the border area on Teesta, there are few villages, not one, but there are multiple villages, which is named as Bhootbari. Now, its literal meaning would be that the house of the ghost, right? And this is the corrected name of those villages. And this is not I'm explaining. Even the villagers, they say this. And then this is how the villages have been named in census reports. So now there are multiple Bhootbaris, and the Bhootbaris were basically the Bhotebaris. And the Bhotebaris basically the villages or the dwelling area of the Bhutias. Back in the days, people used to move from hills along the river for various purposes, be it religious or be it trade. They used to get to the plains area, to what is some of the area in presently in Bangladesh, around Rangpur and all. So along, and some of the monks also move along. So that's how some of the hill dwellers started living along the river banks. In the lower altitudinal area, Bhutias are essentially the higher altitudinal community. But some of their, you call it permanent settlement, which became permanent later, or maybe the temporary settlement. But that's how those places got named. So now, for all practical purposes, those villages are both baris, but it is Bhotebaris, the dwellings of the Bhutias, right? So this is how that this disconnect has been there, which has built slowly. So one is the need, and another is how, if the need is not there, what do you do with it? So maybe somewhere, be it in institutions like art, in education institutions, that we'll have to talk about river valleys in a more connected, of the river basins in a more connected manner, rather than owning up only the certain section of the particular river.
Yeah, I think that's a very nicely summed up, looking at how we all are connected, and not just a section. And because even in my experience, when I was in Bangladesh, I could see there are chawl, right, where because of the overflow of the upstream river, then there are islands, which is basically just happens in the middle of after the rainy season and all that. So, and many of the people in Bangladesh were all flooded, and all their lands were submerged and all that. So they had this Chilmari, especially in Chilmari. So I think we would love to hear more from Tulsi also, because he's been doing, I think we've lost them, right? Oh, let's wait.
Yeah.
Okay. Let them come back.
Maybe the backend team can quickly check with them.
Yeah. Really nice to have Usha ma'am also here. Maybe we can just ask even, from the audience if they want to share something while we wait for them to come back. As we wait, let's see. I wanted to really share this part of the report. Can I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I really wanted to share this part of the report where I could actually see this area as the multi-hazard index value. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so I was really fascinated to see that in the lower region, we had places like Dentam, Mangan, Matyali, Haldibari, Kabi, all these were in the, I think multi-hazard index value was low. And the moderate one was, all these places like Yuksum, Darjeeling, Pulbazar, Kalimpong, Pakyong, Jorthang. So they were into this, moderate. And the high was this Rabungla, Namchi, Yangyang. And to see these names in the report, it actually gives, it connects me to the disaster because I can see the names of the villages, which is actually of, the hazard that it lies in. And I think this kind of names really helps us realize which zone am I in, because when I saw that Darjeeling is, since I'm from Darjeeling, and I could see that Darjeeling is in a moderate multi-hazard index value, that also makes me feel like, okay, we are not in a very safe zone. So I guess this report really brings in a picture to the disaster, because what we have heard also is disasters through the news and through this narratives where people are saying, okay, there is some landslide, there was an earthquake. But when we kind of see the names of these villages and these are in these zones, I think it's something really well done work to kind of bring that names into the village, because that ways it gives ownership to the villages, it gives ownership to the even the municipality, and it gives ownership to even the state for that matter, like why they need to look into these matters very, very cautiously. And I think that's one of the key thing that I took out from this project. And another one was also how they have divided the blocks and sub-district names, because when we look at disaster, it really brings out, okay, in Sikkim and that Singtam, there was this some disaster, but when it got divided into blocks and sub-district, the localization of disaster is something which can be really looked into very deeply, and it's not a blanket disaster news, but something which is from that region. And I felt like this is something which we can look at. This is one thing which I wanted to share. Is there anything that you guys found something very interesting that you would want to point out in this paper? Like Namrata?
Yeah, Minky, there's actually a question from Ashish ji for you. Maybe we can ask him to unmute and ask you directly. Okay.
Okay. Ashish sir, you can ask me question.
Okay. No, thanks. While we were waiting for them to hopefully
Yeah.
come back, Ninkit, I wanted to know whether, because in your own work, you would have spoken to lots and lots of people along the Teesta. Do you think in terms of oral history, is there a narrative, especially from the older people, that these so-called natural hazards are increasing over time or decreasing over time? Is there anything like that from your own? It would be anecdotal. There's probably no systematic survey. but just from your own experience, what do older people say about this?
Well, I think there are a lot of folktale about the water level rising, and we have a very famous folklore of Teesta Rangit themselves, where the whole water level was rising and submerged the whole land. That one is there, but there are a lot of prophecies, which talks about how this place will go through the deluge and all that. And these prophecies are mostly in Nampa Namtar, that is like the manuscripts which was written the lecture manuscripts, and mostly even the shamans do give prophecies. We have shamans who used to pray to the downstream. In fact, just a couple of days ago, I was in a place called Chekra. So the shaman was responsible for warding off the evil from the downstream and making sure that the upstream communities are safeguarded. It's a different thing now that the shaman's practice is not there, and there's no one to take over the lineage, because only that clan is supposed to pray. And but the shaman used to live in West Bengal, but he used to do the practice for the whole of the mountains. So for him it was not West Bengal or Sikkim, it was upstream. And especially after the Sikkim division happened and the West Bengal happened, so he actually got divided into West Bengal, and till now there are the lamas or the monks who comes to that area to pray, so that the people upstream, I would not say West Bengal or Sikkim, but upstream people are safeguarded from the evil that might enter. When I say evil, it can be sickness, it can be disasters. So these kind of practices are there, and I don't know in what category we would put this, but yes, these are some practices and oral history that brought about. And also they talk a lot about the flood. I think even Dr. Lal was talking about it, the disasters that happened and how it took away the bridge of Teesta, and because of that there was a lot of disasters that happened. So these the memory that people have with the flood is very, very important memories. But over a period of time, our literature has become very written down. So these memories have also kind of become like, because the older generation is not having a space to talk with the younger ones. Of course, there is a detachment, and the oral histories transfer is also kind of becoming lesser day by day. But they talk a lot about these floods that used to happen. There are some songs that's there. So I think the crisis here is these oral histories stories have not been trickled down to the younger generation, and even if it has been, it is mostly through written form, and the whole essence of it kind of gets lost also when it gets written down. So these are a few things which I have experienced in my own experience of documentations. And they talk a lot about uh, they talk a lot about the landslides that happened, and especially during the time when the Britishers had come in, how they were like breaking the boulders, and when they were actually breaking the boulders, there was a lot of landslide that came about, and the whole language was about how the deities were angry. So these languages now, when we talk about it, is very different. Oh yes, we are back.
We are so sorry.
So good to see you. Yes, yes. Please, I don't know where we left you actually, because we had this nice interaction after you guys left. But yeah, I think we were talking about, I think we would love to hear from Mr. Sharma, Tulsi Sharma, because we heard a lot from our Dr. Uttam Lal and Mr. Rajesh Kumar. So yes, Tulsi, since you're not a student, please go ahead. I introduced you as a student, but you have some amazing expertise, which is GIS, and would love to hear about it, because that's something which we really don't talk about it, especially in the mountains.
Thank you. What I would like to say over here is, like in geography also, there are two wings of geography, physical and human geography actually. So this, I think we are dealing just with the physical part only, with the latest techniques that we are using for mapping different, hazardous area zone-wise. what we have created is elevation wise, we have created different zones for this. GIS being a very important tool to, bring the different kind of hazards or disaster into the picture, with various kind of data, you can integrate it and bring it to the picture for the layman also to understand what is going on this particular region. Okay, that we have done. Basically, the theoretical part and other things are dealt by the faculties. I just try to help with the technicalities of this mapping entire region only. So this would be a, like Dr. Uttamlal said, this would be a base to further, where you can carry this study. Like some were talking about anthropogenic activities in different areas of this, river basin. So this would be a base to further go into all those studies. This is just a basic thing from, open sources. We have brought data in and we have tried to bring out the picture of entire river basin, different kind of, hazard mapping we have done over here. That's the thing, what I want to say.
To add up what Madam Lachumpa was, talking about is the highland community should also own up some of their connection with the, lowland, as I was talking about the Bhotebaris. Because even though the frequency of movement along the river in the lower altitudinal area was not, that high, but nonetheless, they do have, some bit of stories or some bit of, legend about the low altitudinal areas. And just the example of Bhutebari is, or the Bhutbari is just one such example, right? Some bit of ownership or some bit of at least emotional connect with the lower altitudinal areas of the same river. If the community in the high altitude area also takes up, it would, if not anything, as I was saying, it would help in reinforcing the voices of the basin of the river. In terms of the volume, there would be more voices for the same river. Because right now, the voices are, if at all, it remains also, sectoral.
That's right. That's very correct. So thank you so much to all three of you. And I really like with GIS mapping, I think it really helps with the visual representation of the landscape, which I think is something like a breath of fresh air, because somewhere this GIS mapping has elucidated a lot of the area which kind of gets affected, and it helps us. And I really was mentioning while you guys were away, where you have localized these blocks and places which talks about which is the disaster, moderate, high and low. That kind of gives the ownership of the place and to the communities also to look at which zone they are living in. And I guess this kind of localization of disaster kind of helps them connect with the larger understanding of disaster and how they are connected, and how the River Teesta is not just upstream or downstream, but both upstream and downstream makes the River Teesta. And I think your work has been really commendable. And of course, it was a very short period of time, but the fact that it has begun means people have started thinking about it. And I mean, it's just a breath of fresh air to see, in spite of all the challenges. I'm sure you all have gone through your own challenges to bring out this data, to understand and deconstruct a lot of ideas of disaster. So I think for me, it's been an honor to be a part of this moderation. And I don't know if I have done justice, but I would really like to hand it over to Shrishti now. And thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this beautiful conversation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Minkit, and thanks, Rajeshji, Uttam, and Tulsi for this fantastic presentation and conversation. Minkit, you did more than justice. You brought a lot of wisdom to this conversation. So thanks for that. And thanks, people who stayed on and were part of this conversation, asked questions and engaged. We are grateful to all of you. And if you're interested, if you find this concept interesting, if you're interested in engaging with these conversations, please reach out to us that have just been mentioned by Namrata in the chat box. And also you can take a look at the link that is being posted, also will be posted in the chat box, and read more about our other reports. In the coming few months, we will launch our third report, which is about coastal bioregions and what does it talk about when we think in terms of seas and oceans, and what bioregions really mean then. So lots of interesting things will be shared in the coming few months. If you're interested, stay engaged, and you can also sign up to be part of this. So thank you so much to all of you again. Hope you have very restful rest of the evening, and thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. All the best.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.